Allow me to present a simple would you rather. Here I've laid out 3 anonymous NFL franchises along with their corresponding record, win percentage, playoff appearances, and one statistic I've left hidden for now. Of these teams, which would you consider to be the most successful? And which would you be happiest supporting as a fan? I'll give you a few seconds. If you're a rational person, you likely answered option C. Thank you for playing along. Now I'll reveal the teams along with the secret stat. Option A was the New Orleans Saints. They've had their share of bad seasons, but won the Super Bowl with Drew Brees in 2010. Option B is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Another team with many rough seasons, they boast the worst all-time winning percentage in NFL history, but nonetheless have 2 Super Bowls from 2003 and 2021. And now for option C, the best team on this list, right? Well, I guess it depends what you value. The Minnesota Vikings have outplayed these 2 prior teams in all categories, including head-to-head, but fall short of them on the biggest stages.
This is not Detroit, man! This is the Super Bowl!
Playing well but falling short is a common theme for these Minnesota Vikings. In fact, the combined record of all other teams who haven't won a Super Bowl gives us an average win percentage of 45.9. The Vikings' all-time win percentage is 54.6, a staggering 8.7% outlier from the mean. The difference between them and second place is more than the difference between second and 8th. They're also the only team with 0 Super Bowl rings that holds an all-time winning record, although the Chargers could get there with a solid 2024 season. Could this just be dumb luck? Is it really inexplicable? I think I may have a diagnosis, but we're gonna have to dig a little bit deeper. The first thing that comes to mind when you think of a bad team is likely a lack of talent. Teams don't historically have success when plagued with bad draft decisions and a lack of player development. While this can be viewed as subjective, I could hardly diagnose the Vikings with an all-time lack of generational talent. They have a whopping 22 current Hall of Famers, along with a few future hopefuls on the roster right now. Just to name a few, we have Fran Tarkenton, Alan Page, John Randall, Chris Carter, and oh yeah, Randy Moss. I don't think there's any point in arguing that this team hasn't been good enough to win it all. The boys in purple have seemingly never gone more than a few years without stumbling upon another generational superstar. There are teams that wait decades for players of this caliber, and the Vikings have held 3 of them in just the 21st century. The one and only argument I'd possibly consider when it comes to no talent is the quarterback perspective. The Vikings have experienced a lot of turnover at the QB position, which is never a good sign. Comparing them to their division rivals, the Packers have had 3 quarterbacks since 1992 that have started a season's worth of games for them. The Vikings have had 10 such quarterbacks. In my opinion, this argument falls apart when you look at who Minnesota has had manning the ship since their inception. Fran Tarkenton led them to 3 Super Bowls and now is in the Hall of Fame. They've also brought in 2 other Hall of Fame quarterbacks in Brett Favre and Warren Moon, who were admittedly in the later stages of their careers, but nonetheless both had Pro Bowl seasons during their stints on the team. The same goes for Randall Cunningham, who had his only career All-Pro season on the Vikings in 1998. For these reasons, combined with numerous successful regular seasons to back it all up, I think we can swiftly rule out any lack of talent arguments from the conversation. So if the Vikings possess the talent and often prove themselves capable in the regular season, the logical place to investigate next is the playoffs. Football fans often come to various conclusions as to why their team doesn't succeed in the playoffs. Whether it's whining about unfair overtime rules or bad referee calls, the excuses we often see frame it as if the losing team's performance bears less weight in the loss than one random rule or referee call. Overall, it's clear to see that a lot of NFL fans tend to hold strong victim complexes. To be fair though, it's only human to notice when your favorite team is being wronged, but turn a blind eye when something works in your favor. In the long run though, these out-of-control factors like ref calls and random luck do tend to balance out. But it can't balance out perfectly. There does have to be one team that draws the short straw. Could that team be the Vikings? That question brings us to the final quote-unquote unlucky event that just so happens to be the main complaint you'll hear among bitter Minnesota fans.
Good snap, lead home for the win!
Gus Johnson's emphatic call echoed noxiously through Minnesota homes. That is, if they didn't turn off the TV the second they saw the kick's trajectory. This one specifically was extra painful because it came just a week after they forced overtime versus the Bengals just to fumble the ball away and miss out on an opportunity to kick a game-winning field goal. No regular season loss can match the pain felt from a playoff loss though, and the Vikings are no strangers to playoff heartbreakers. Everyone remembers Blair Walsh's infamous shank in the 2015 wildcard game versus Seattle, but did kicking alone actually swing that game? And have other playoff games been flipped due to kicking? To figure out if the Vikings really have been screwed over by kickers, let's look through some of their recent playoff history. We'll be using a simple expected points system to decide whether a game was or wasn't decided by kickers. Let's use Adam Vinatieri as an example. Throughout his career, Adam converted on 50-plus yard field goals 63% of the time. A field goal is worth 3 points when made, so anytime he attempts a 50-plus yard field goal, his team can expect to, on average, score 1.89 points. Field goals are all or nothing though, so if he makes it, the team scores 3 points, which is 1.11 points above expected. But if he misses, they score 0 points, 1.89 below expected. If this all doesn't completely make sense, just bear with me. We'll start with an example game. The Vikings' 2023 playoff game versus the Giants featured kickers Greg Joseph and Graham Gano. The first kick of the game was a successful extra point by Greg Joseph. He converts on these kicks 90% of the time, so the expected score was 0.9, and they ended up with 1, a positive 0.1 point difference. There ended up being no missed field goals nor extra points in this game, so kicking didn't really play a drastic role in swinging the result. After adding up the points above expected results for the Vikings, they lost by 7 points and ended up with a higher points above expected luck score than the Giants. Therefore, we can easily conclude that kicking luck did not swing the result of this game. Now we move on to a more polarizing game to figure out if Blair Walsh's miss was really as bad as it seemed. This is the 2015 wildcard game between the Vikings and the Seahawks. Walsh actually made his first 3 field goals of the game, drilling from 22, 43, and 47. This put the Vikings at plus 1.5 expected points early in the game. After a few kicks from the Seahawks, we arrive at the kick heard across Minnesota. In his career, Blair Walsh hit 27 of 28 field goals from between 20 and 29 yards. His average expected points on this kick is 2.9.
Snap good, spot down, Walsh's kick is up, and it is no good, he missed it! Are you kidding me? The season can't end like that! He missed it left!
Walsh's missed kick brought our points above expected total all the way from positive 0.9 to negative 2. And given that the final score differential was just 1 point, the expected score disregarding kicker luck does flip the winner. You may have been able to guess that this one would flip, but does this make all of the kicking complaints valid? Does luck only ever go against the Vikings? We'll jump forward now to 2020 with a wild card rematch between the Vikings and the Saints. Knowing what went down a few years prior, this game was highly anticipated. From a kicking standpoint, everything started standard, with no blundered field goals or extra points. Then, Will Lutz, who was coming off his first ever Pro Bowl season, lined up from 43 yards out.
3-yard try by Lutz. And it is no good.
Lutz usually drills that one, and it gave the Saints a full 2.5 point hit to their expected score. He actually ended up redeeming himself by hitting a game-tying field goal to end regulation and force overtime, where Kyle Rudolph caught the game-winning touchdown to send them home. After taking a glance at the final score and points above expected, you would think that this is a non-swing game. After all, the Vikings won by 6 and were only given 2.6 points to kicker luck. But if we look at the game as it stood in regulation, you'll realize overtime never should have happened. If the Vikings didn't luck out with Lutz's missed field goal, Rudolph never even gets a chance to catch the winner. Because of this, we must conclude that this is a swung playoff game that the Vikings actually won due to kicker luck. Not so hopelessly unlucky now, are they? Let's not speak too soon though, there is one more game I'd like to showcase. So we've seen it swing both ways, both for and against Minnesota, but both of these games were lower leverage wildcard games, and neither lucky winner ended up making it past the divisional round. What if we traveled back to a much more important game, the 1998 NFC Championship? Here, the Vikings are looking to make their first Super Bowl in over 20 years, and we've got a clash of titans at kicker. It's snubbed Hall of Famer Gary Anderson versus Hall of Famer Morton Anderson, both regarded as two of the greatest kickers of all time. The stakes couldn't be higher, and the kickers couldn't be better. In fact, Gary Anderson hasn't missed a kick this whole season. He's one of 9 qualified kickers to ever accomplish this feat in the regular season. As expected, everything is smooth sailing through this one, with neither kicker slipping up, and it's a 7-point game early in the fourth when the two offenses go cold for a few drives. The Vikings cough up the football in their own territory, but end up recovering on defense with a 4th down stop. They then drive into field goal range, and Gary Anderson sets up from 38 yards out to put the nail in the coffin.
So that's a pretty good bet if you say, do you think Gary Anderson will make this field goal? The answer should probably be yes.
39 yards away, and it's not good.
Impossible. Gary Anderson's first miss of the entire 1998 season comes in the NFC Championship with the game on the line? It does not get worse than that. The Falcons ended up sending this one to overtime and won on an identical 38-yard field goal from Morton Anderson. Okay, I'll admit it, that one was both devastating and incredibly high leverage. The Vikings seriously could have had their first and only Super Bowl if it weren't for that miss, but I would argue that it still doesn't completely explain the discrepancy between their win percentage and lack of Super Bowls. I do have one more theory though that could offer some explanation. Since 1970, the Vikings have had just 15 losing seasons. That's 38 winning or even, and 15 losing. They've never held the number 1 pick due to their own performance, only picking in the 1 spot as a result of trades. Minnesota has to be the most stubbornly good team of all time. They've never had a true rebuilding stage. In fact, since their first 4 seasons as a team in the 60s, the Vikings have never strung more than 2 losing seasons in a row. That type of streak is unheard of in most major pro sports. Minnesota has never and probably never will transition to a fan or managerial culture where losing is okay in the short term to foster long-term success. I actually find it refreshing to see this while living in a world full of fans being tortured by their favorite teams deciding to lose games on purpose. I can't help but pity the Pistons fans who had to watch their favorite team lose 28 in a row, or the White Sox fans who are currently watching their favorite team post one of the worst single seasons in MLB history. And while I hear and understand the argument that fans would rather see their team have 4 years of losing if it meant a championship down the road, I still don't see the stubborn winning attitude as a bad thing. Winning is and always should be the goal, and I feel like the Vikings shouldn't ever attribute all of their losing to having a winning culture. It just doesn't make sense, and I honestly think tanking should have no place in the world of sports. Yes, maybe if the Vikings would have at some point decided to rebuild for a few years, they could have come out the other end with a Super Bowl, but I still think they're doing the right thing. If it weren't for this stubborn win-now attitude, I doubt the Vikings would be able to keep such a diehard fan base. Sure, the Buccaneers have 2 Super Bowls, but there's a reason their fan base dwarfs that of the Vikings. Overall, I think this stubborn attitude should be commended rather than encouraging dishonorable tanking. As for my thoughts, I don't think any of these issues specifically are the reason for the largest and saddest outliers in NFL history. In fact, I think it's only a matter of time before the Vikings will finally see their day at the top. Luck will always come back around, and I truly see potential in the current management of Kevin O'Connell and Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. Minnesota is consistently towards the top of NFLPA voting in terms of player happiness and management, and there's always a reason to be happy when you have Justin Jefferson highlighting your receiver room. If you're an 80-year-old cranky Vikings fan, you definitely deserve to complain and moan all you want. You've lived through the turmoil. But if you're young with decades of fandom left to experience, I would suggest a more optimistic approach. There's a brighter future ahead.